Oh, yeah. Welcome, welcome. All right, y'all. We are back. Welcome, practical proficiency people, to another meeting. Today, we are going to be talking all about continuing our Start with CI series. And today's class is about how to adapt your textbook, which could also be your outline or curriculum, for more proficiency oriented instruction. So, today's class is going to look a little bit different than what we've normally been doing. And we've got a strict cutoff because I want to make sure that this is short, sweet, and to the point. But though we have a little bit of a different format, I'm really curious about something. Can you tell me? First, I'm in here checking to make sure that this is going live and working well. Can you put in the comments below that you can see and hear me and that everything is Gucci and we're set? I see myself. Looks good. Lovely. All right, next part. I'm going to get in here so I can see the comments. Can you let me know, what are you going to be for Halloween? Or what are your kids going to be for Halloween if you're taking kids trick-or-treating? And like, that totally counts if you're like aunt of the year, uncle of the year, all that good stuff. Like, we're all family here. So I am really curious about this because I had to stay up late last night just to get a freaking costume because I was afraid it wasn't going to get here on time. I thought I was early. Like, it's not even that close. It's not even that close. But it's real, y'all. Like, get on those Halloween costumes. And I'm going to give you some hints for the super nerds out there because clearly I'm in that boat. But what Star Wars character am I going to be if I give you a few hints? My son is hella into Star Wars, and we thought, like, there's so many good characters. Like, let's just go all into it. And I mean, who doesn't like Star Wars? So I'm going to be a really cool character who made an appearance on The Mandalorian. And she's orange and a total BA. So if you know who she is, put her name in the comments. I just found a costume and I really hope it gets here on time. But I'll share a picture with you because I'm going to be painting my face orange and going all out. It's going to be really, really fun. Okay, y'all. So I'm excited to see what your Halloween costumes are. And while you're doing that and letting me know what your costumes are, I'm just really excited about it. I love Halloween. Who doesn't love Halloween, right? Let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to share my screen. Da-na-na-na. And actually, you know what? Before I do that, I have everything set up. But before I do that, we do have a bit of a different format today because I want to jump right into what we got going on. But let's start with what we always do before a class, because you're not in this group to waste time, right? Like, you're in to hang out, find community, as well as to learn something. So let's make sure that we are focusing ourselves and our intentions on what we are doing here today. What are you hoping to get out of this class? Set your intention and your action plan. Today, we're going to be talking about briefly, very briefly, about what ideas I have for you for how you can make a textbook work for you if you're trying to switch to a more proficiency-oriented approach. Because the truth is that textbooks are not your enemy. Like, textbooks can be great, but they are also not what we should be completely going off of, because as you'll see from the textbook that I show you, not everything is exactly, kosher and lined up with research-based practice from textbooks. Because to be fair, the superstar that I love so much, Bill Van Patten, says this all the time, is that honestly, textbooks go off of what teachers ask for, and teachers love to see drill-based practice. So a lot of the times textbooks can't really sell unless they have these certain things. It doesn't mean that the people who put work into the textbooks aren't listening to what we're saying when it comes to proficiency-oriented instruction. It just means that we've got a little bit more work to do when it comes for making sure that this is what we demand to be in textbooks. That's my little spiel about that. But the point of the story being is that, I've been there before. Like, you often don't have a ton of choice with what textbook you might be working with. So today I'm going to give you some options, and I want you to pick your action plan by the end of class. What are you going to get out of our time today? Now, to help you frame that, here's what class is going to look like today. I scanned in a few pages from a textbook, and we're going to look at it today. Many times in these PD classes that we do together, I do tell you a lot about things that you could do and give you some options and give you research and yada, yada, yada. This one's going to be different because today we're going to do straight up examples, just examples, examples, examples. And if this was our textbook, we're going to do yes, no, use this, don't use this, use this, don't use this. So this is going to be very, very, very practical based. So I want you to look at what we see on these textbook pages, and I'll go ahead and jump into these here. Let me know if you can see this textbook page as we come into this here. Maybe you've used this textbook, maybe you recognize it. And make sure that you're thinking as we go through this class, what can you use from the examples that we look at today? I thought that for something like this, like for how to adapt your textbook, like a real life example will probably be more helpful to you. So without further ado, let's jump on it. All right, cool. I see we can see this here. And you know what? I think I can make this a little bit bigger. Is everybody cool with that? If I make this a little bit larger? All right, here we go. So friends, this is actually my old Spanish textbook. So this is from my college days when I was learning Spanish, from like Spanish 201, maybe, I think. And I had literally an amazing teacher, an absolutely amazing teacher. I don't know if she would consider herself a proficiency-oriented instructor by any means, but the way she taught was incredible. I learned so much in that class, so much in that class. It set me up really, really well. So you're going to see in here the way that we use this textbook in class, as well as lots of supplemental materials and things like that. But I thought that looking at this would be really helpful. This is from Aventuras, and full stop. All of this stuff is completely copyrighted and does not belong to me. And we are just using this as an example. Okay, so don't be doing none of that shady stuff, although I know none of you would do that. All right, so let's take a look at this here. This first page is Hogar, Dulce Hogar. So you can tell that this chapter that we're about to take a look at has to do with los quehaceres, house vocabulary, and chores. And what we're going to be coming up on is you'll see that it's a lot of commands, which in Spanish goes well with the subjunctive because a lot of those meld together. Now, those of us French teachers, like, I was so confused. And you'll see this as all of these are actually my old notes that you'll see on here, my old chicken scratch, which is very hard to read because I'm a Catholic school graduate. So I write in really, really sloppy cursive. And as a French major learning Spanish, this unit threw me for such a loop. I had such a hard time with this whole concept because, like, y'all French teachers know, like, commands are easy. You just put it in T form. You just move on with your life. It's no big deal. And there's like a few irregulars, whatevs. But Spanish, absolutely not. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. So this might also be maybe helpful to you. Walking back through my old shoes of trying to learn commands was very eye-opening. So maybe this will be for you as well. All right. So what we're going to take a look at here is when you are talking about using your textbook, the first thing that you should, of course, do, which you've probably already done because it's October, is flipped through it and to see what the structure looks like and assess a little bit how much does it line up with your goals. That could be two things. How much does it line up with your proficiency goals, as well as how much does it line up with what's expected of you from your department and your school, with some wiggle room, because, you know, I advocate very strongly for pick your battles. My big battle, I would say, would be assessment, but also, like, you know where the big waves are and you know what things like are not really worth touching. You know what those are. And the other thing that I would say is really important to look at is make sure that you're using your textbook as a guide for your content and what you know you need to cover. Because if you're working in a department with other colleagues, frankly, it's irresponsible to leave your students out to dry if they're in your Spanish 2 course or your German 2 course, and then they're going to have somebody else for German 3, right? So let's be looking at the textbook to see, like, what are students going to be expecting to see in other courses. What you can do with a textbook overall, just in general, is you can adapt your teaching style and your teaching methodology to be very proficiency oriented and pick out the things that align with your goals and use those in the textbook, and then leave the other things out unless they're required. So we're going to practice doing that today. If you are looking at a textbook maybe as a possible resource, maybe you're watching this video later on down the road, or you're looking at your textbook for the first time and you're using this video to help guide you. This is what I suggest you do. Review one chapter like we're doing here. Like this is one chapter of a textbook, and we're looking to see, what does that one chapter look like? What's the content in there? How much vocabulary is expected to be covered? How much of that are we actually going to focus on and not focus on? And for like this exact page, like what I would even do, and of course, this is a college level textbook, so there's going to be more words in there. But you know as well as I do that, honestly, age doesn't really matter that much. The brain can really only handle, on average, 10 new vocabulary terms at a time. So you see how this section of things, like la casa y sus cuartos, the house and its rooms, this is actually organized very well in terms of, it's separated as well by types of things in, about a 5 to 10 group basis. Whenever possible, I would say they tried to use some pictures. But in terms of vocabulary binding, which is a research-based method to better keep vocabulary in students' heads, especially when you have so many new ones to introduce, like dining room, hallway, patio, basement, blah, 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 that all of these terms, you'll notice that all of them are out of context. Like you have the Spanish and then the English. That's kind of a no-no. And most textbooks do this. Most textbooks do this because it's incredibly difficult to have one picture for the bedroom, one picture for the attic, one picture for the balcony. But textbooks that are more on the proficiency-oriented spectrum will be really good about having, like, what they could have done instead, and it only would have been one more page, is they could have had a picture of an entire house, like a cross-section of a house, and have each piece labeled with maybe some clarifying language if needed. So what does clarifying language look like? I've seen this done really well in textbooks before. Really good textbooks have clarifying language for vocabulary terms, like la entrada, the entrance. You could put things like la entrada contiene la puerta, está típicamente frente de la casa. Like it's usually in the front of the house. Like it has some clarifying language to help students contextualize the word without having to look it up. I actually did this today because I'm doing a nutrition program right now to help me with my running goals, and I'm doing it in Spanish. And I came across this word, rueda. I don't know what that means. I've never used that. I've literally never used that word. And rueda, my Spanish speakers know, means I didn't know what it meant. So I looked it up. I just typed it quickly into the Google search bar. And the first definition that I found was la rueda es un círculo y se mueve. Like it had all these words that had to do with, like, it moves things forward. It has, I don't even remember what the word was, but it has parts, it has spokes. And then it showed me a picture. I was like, oh, it's a wheel. I get it. And now I'm never going to forget that word because I looked it up. I saw the word in context. I knew I needed it in order to understand the sentence. And then I found the definition written in Spanish with other words along the way. Like a word, if la rueda was, I'm sure I've encountered it many times in my Spanish speaking career because it's not like it's uncommon, the word wheel. But that right there, it's much more cemented in my vocabulary now. So this is an example of how you can evaluate a vocabulary page. Here are the things that you should look for. One, is the vocabulary presented in context whenever possible? There might be some things that are very, 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 very difficult to present in context. for example, things that aren't objects, like maybe verbs or feelings, those can be very, very hard to present in context with pictures. That's okay. Do they have corresponding contextualizing elements, like lots of pictures or people or animals doing things in that setting? Do they have like lots of things to help your students remember? That's what you're looking for. That's how you can adapt and evaluate your textbook. Now, if your textbook is what the technical term that we like to use is trash, if your textbook is trash and it has, you know, like stuff all over the place that are really out of date, then I highly recommend that you make yourself a separate vocabulary list of the ones that you would like to use. That's very much worth your time because your vocabulary list is something that you can use over and over and over again, right? It's not one of those things where it might be like a one and done activity. You're going to use vocabulary a lot. But I would not do that until you have decided and whittled down exactly what your functional chunks are. Okay. The next thing I want you to look at, this is the next thing, is you're going to be taking a look at some activities inside the book and see what the practice looks like. Now, you want to be looking for, does the textbook have practice in all 4 modes? And is number 5, is that practice differentiated? Because if it's a textbook, it should be doing the work for you, right? Right. So here's something that I want you to be looking for. Use the activities that work. Well, I guess I should say not looking for, but this is your new textbook mantra. Use the activities that work and take the rest as a reference point. And if students want to do them, they can do them later to study. You can always leave them. And honestly, if you have some required activities and you don't do them in your classroom, who's really going to know, right? Like, you know which ones matter and which ones don't, because that does happen. Sometimes you might be in a situation where you have to do certain activities. Maybe you have department assigned group work or homework. Like, that's cool. That happens. You know, if you look at the activity and you're like, this is bleh, then you make the decision on whether it's worth making waves or not. I'm the type of person where I would say most of the time, like, nobody's going to check on this, so I'm not going to worry about it. But if I changed the quiz, that would really screw over my colleagues, because then kids who are in other classes, other Spanish ones, who were taking the same quiz as me, and they found out that the questions were different, that's going to create problems for my colleagues. That's not fair. So even if the quiz isn't really what I would agree with, you leave that quiz alone, because that's going to make problems for your colleagues. You know what I mean? That's how you tell the difference. And you'll know what's best for you. You'll be able to look at situations where it's like, do I choose proficiency or do I choose my happiness at work? You'll know what the difference is. And in a few years, you'll be in the situation where you won't have to choose, because this is the direction that everybody's moving. Trust me. I've seen it myself. Trust me. Trust. Okay, let's take a look at this example, because I think this is a really good example of what's often in textbooks. And you let me know in the comments if you are watching this now or if you're watching this later on the replay. It's all good. Let me know. Number 3, emparejar, which means pair up. This is another good indication. Now, remember that this is also like, this is for college level students who are supposed to be around a level, like equivalent of a level 3 or 4 in a 201 course, I guess you could say. It says pair up each dibujo. What's that word in English? Drawing with its description. Then name all of the drawings. You see me work bilingually here. Now, tell me what you think. Is this a proficiency-oriented activity? Yes or no? And don't worry about like whether it's interesting or not, because like honestly, it's a textbook. Like none of them are going to be interesting. But proficiency-oriented, yes or no? Waiting with bated breath. You ready? C. This is a good one. And here's why. Lo usas para tomar agua. You use this to drink water. So much language is happening here. The student has to read and understand what's happening. And then they have to put the number there and label it. So they're matching it up, and then they have to label the description under here. So there's like 3 different instances where they're getting that, all of that contextualized vocabulary, like boom, boom, boom in their heads. And the best part about it too is that it's not asking about accurate spelling, which, that's important, but it's not important in the first steps. That's the difference. It's not important in the first few exercises to perfect that spelling. You can do that on assessments and you can worry about that on assessments, but not in the practice part. So this, like, necesitas este objeto para limpiarte la boca después de comer. This is beautiful. Number 6, you need this to clean your mouth after eating. This is a hard sentence for level 3 students. Okay, you got the word este in here, which I don't know about you, but used to always throw me for a loop because I never knew which one it was. And then you got limpiarte la boca. Like they're gonna have to remember the word limpiar, which means to clean. They've got mouth, they've got comer. So they're probably only gonna pick out like 4 words from the sentence, right? So they're gonna have to do a lot of work to figure out which one this is. And there might be a lot of that process that happens when you do the easy ones first and then you leave the harder ones. Oh, there's so many cognitive processes happening here. It's beautiful. It's really good. So that is a good activity. This, I will tell you that as a student, this was so boring. It was the best language practice I ever got. I still remember all these videos. I watched them so many times. You can tell I'm a language major, right? I watched them so many times. But the best part about the having a textbook is that the videos came with these little transcripts, right, of what was going on in the story. And in the videos, what they also did is they would put special emphasis on all the new phrases that they were introducing. This is really cool. I like this aspect of textbooks a great deal. And I wish that everybody had access to cool textbooks like this. Now, what did I want to show you on here? Oh, yeah. Okay, this part. Cierto o falso, true or false. And then it says correct the untrue statements. I don't know about that. I don't know about correcting the false statements. That can be like I was a language major, right? And like I was into this stuff, like really into this stuff. And you can tell that I looked at that and was like, no, I barely did it. I just did the absolute bare minimum of that because it was hard. It was like way too much above my level for what I needed to do. So I don't even know. That's not really like a proficiency oriented thing, but I would just keep in mind that sometimes you'll know what happens with that. But sometimes textbooks are really, really into writing and writing based practice and overproduction, like the overemphasis of the constant need for production. And like production is not a bad thing, but a lot of times you'll find that in textbooks that the activities will ask students to do way more than they're capable of at the level that they are at. Like this, I just learned all this vocabulary. All of these are new phrases to me. Like I'm not going to be able to correct these sentences yet, but this, I can fill in stuff. I can say whether something's true or false. Correcting, I don't know. All right, here's where we get to the juicy stuff, right? We only have a few more minutes, so let's get into this. This is where we get into the juicy stuff. So now we're learning ustedes commands. So for non-Spanish speakers, this has to do with formal commands, and we're learning how to form them. Such a hard time with this. I had such a hard time with this. This, I would say, is a very nice grammatical presentation of something that's good for, reference. But I will tell you that as a learner, this was a lot for me. and I found it to be very difficult to digest. But, it was great reference. As a teacher, I'm not at all a fan of the verb charts. I'm team anti-verb charts, but I'm also not like going to be a person to tell you that you need to throw them all away, because students do like to have that, reference point with them. But if you asked me to do something like memorize this, I would have a hard time. I would have a really hard time. What I did think was cool about this is that they gave you the examples of, the infinitive, the yo form, and then what it turned into. But this did not help me when it came to the practice. It did not, because you'll see if you look in here, there's a lot of like she. Like I made a lot of mistakes in here as we were going over this in class, a lot. Okay, I wanted to show you this activity because I think it's amazing. So we're running out of time, so I'm just going to go right into this one and show you this one. It didn't scan very well, but you can kind of see it here. All right, ready? Okay, listen. It says, what are they saying? Look at the pictures and write a correct command for each one. This is an amazing exercise, but I remember this one specifically because I had no idea what to write. The teacher went over this on the board and I copied them straight down. This was one of those moments of like overproduction, asking your students to do too much. With these exercises, and I remember that pretty vividly in class, it was like years ago. But the activity itself is really good. You know what would make this activity really good? And here's an opportunity for you to adapt it. Give them a word bank. Give them a word bank. Like I would have put, abran los libros, cierre la puerta, tráigame el menú, y whatever that one is, barran el piso or el suelo, one of them. I can never remember which one to use. You tell me which one in the comments, because I'm sure you know which one it is if you're a Spanish teacher or a Spanish speaker. These ones here, this is a really great example because you got, again, that picture reinforcement, and it's all context-based. All right, here's what I don't like about this textbook. So we just learned this. Now we're learning this. Scary, super scary. Super scary. I remember writing down all this stuff being like, I don't know what's going on. It was rough. Okay. Let's take a look at this exercise and see if this is a good example or not. What do we need to do in this one? Oh no, it didn't. All right, this one's going to be hard to read. Let me see if I can remember what's in here. You know what? Let's go down to number 2. This is a better example. Okay, so for number 2, you've got 3 things here. Combine the elements to make sentences and use the subjunctive. So you've got some expressions here, some subjunctive triggers, those of us who use Romance languages, and I think there are in other ones. You got subjunctive triggers here, and then you have the subject, Sofia Vergara. And then you have activities here, and they're all in the infinitive. This is trash. This is trash. Don't make your students do this. Like, ask yourself, what are they going to get out of this? Es bueno que yo. Like, what are they going to get out of this? There's no context. There's not really any purpose for the sentence or any communicative purpose out of the sentence. And honestly, at the end of the day, there are so many different types of verbs in here. There's regulars, there's irregulars, there's ARs, there's ERs, there's IRs, there's stem changers. There's all kinds of things in here. And there's going to be a lot of spelling changes that need to happen as well, that you'll spend more time in class going over all of this than you ever would. It would be such a waste of time. Like, don't do that activity. And that's my very strong opinion on that. Oh, and I circled this one because I think this is a really good one. This is a really, really good one. You ready? Okay. entre amigas. So this practice, what you have to do in this one is complete the dialogue with the words from the list. And you've got all of the words actually already conjugated. And it's a dialogue, and the students have to fill in. But here's what I love about this too, is that there's some that are in the subjunctive and some that are not. So they're still getting that practice, and they have to choose based on the context and the communication of what's going on in the sentence. This one I also like here. So for this exercise, number 2, unos consejos for recommendations, it says, give somebody some recommendations, use these 3 verbs, and then use the model up here. This is a perfect example of how you can start to push the production at the appropriate zone of proximal development, that nice ZPD zone we like to hang out in, without pushing the envelope too much. Remember I told you that I, as a student, had trouble with that earlier writing exercise where I had to rewrite the sentences, and like it wasn't even that much vocabulary. This one, with just a little bit more scaffolding, is going to be much more effective for your students. Because in this one, you have a specific context, your mom. I don't know what's going on here because it's a little bit cut off. Let's go to, let's do this one. This is funny. All right, so your dad. Today I don't want to do something. Whatever. He doesn't want to do something. So then your students have 3 choices of verbs. They can use, I suggest you do this. I recommend you do this. You should not do this. They only have 3 choices. And the best part too is that they really have to choose between 2 things. Like there's a lot less options for them to write, so the overwhelm won't be there as much. And you can guide your students a lot more with an activity like this. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of really helpful things that you can use in a textbook that is still proficiency oriented. I wouldn't really say that they're, particularly exciting by any means, but you know as well as I do, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And that a lot of these are very useful. I remember using these a lot, like all of these examples. I highlighted and copied these and wrote them down a lot. And then I would rewatch the creepy little vocab videos. I remember doing that a lot as a student. And your students will not do that because they're in high school and they're not a future language teacher. And this last one, this is something that you'll find a lot in textbooks, and you can just go ahead and steer away from these. And that is complete the sentence with the correct form of the verb. You know as well as I do that like that's not really that helpful. It's not really that helpful. There's me forgetting my G. Que no salgas. Okay, so what do we learn from this textbook? Number 1, that textbooks are not your enemy, that there's lots and lots of good things inside of textbooks, but that also textbooks are playing to their audience. They're playing to who's buying them. So there's going to be lots and lots of emphasis on writing, and there's going to be lots and lots of emphasis on conjugation production, which has its place, but should be done in context. Like this completely out of context. Like I remember just like bam, 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 doing this, not even thinking about it. And your students are also doing it and not thinking about it. And they're going to brain dump it and not even remember it. The more examples that you can give where you're using activities that are already differentiated. I didn't see a ton in here that were like that, just from the pages that I gave you. Or where you have things where they have to read a passage and really look deep into it and pick the right verb form based on what's going on in the sentence. They're picking up so much more. So much more. And that the presentation of grammar, there's definitely lots and lots of different ways to do it. And there are more proficiency oriented ways to do it, but like you're always going to see it in a textbook. That's just what always is going to happen. No matter what. So, friends, this is an example of a textbook that you could certainly use all the examples that we talked about in here to help guide your decisions as you're looking at your own textbook and deciding, what am I going to use? What am I going to trash? So remember, activities like this, awesome, really helpful to you. And activities like this, like somewhere in the middle, maybe not so great. And then you have other ones that are just the worst, like this one. Okay, so let me know in the comments below, as we talked about earlier, what's going to be your Halloween costume. Let me know what textbook you are working with, if you are working with the textbook. I'm a little bit, I didn't really use a textbook in the classroom because the ones I had were just so old. They were so old. They weren't really that helpful. But I did have a little bit of avancemos to go off of, and thé branché for French, and a little bit of bien dit. I remember using that like as a little bit of a backbone or a spine to help me craft a curriculum map, but barely. So if you're working with any of those bad boys, I've seen those and I know what they look like. But otherwise, I wish you a wonderful Wednesday, and thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you next time.